Yeah, well, it's a very easy reading book. I mean, I read it super quick,
Good.
probably because I already agreed with you on
Yeah.
most of the things. So maybe many of the things you're saying weren't so controversial for me. But so what are some of the big, don't spoil the book for anybody, but what are some of the big issues that you had to hammer home in order for everything else to work in that?
Yeah, so the book's kind of divided into three main sections. The first section is all focused on the formatting, which we've talked about a little bit. The fact that over the last 800 years, there have been a lot of well-intentioned additives that have been put into the Bible. Hey, there it is, the Bible reset. A lot of well-intentioned additives, all starting with chapter and verse numbers, which were put in there by scholars to help people just find things more easily. And then piggybacking off of those, you get section headings and you get footnotes and all the things that we've discussed. And just diving into like, okay, those things are good for some things, but what are the side effects of those being in there, and what do they make more difficult? What do they, kind of bring out of focus when you're trying to read, that sort of thing. The second main section is all about habits and practices, kind of norms and expectations that we've built up around the Bible, things that we've taken for granted about what good Bible reading looks like. So, for example, especially kind of in the modern West, like personal quiet times are like the top of the pyramid, right? If you're being consistent with your personal quiet times when you're reading, you're doing it right. And I would say, like, listen, I do personal quiet times. They're great. But like, if you only ever do that, you're kind of missing out on a core component of what the Bible was made for, which is to form communities of people. And so what would it look like to return to a more community-based reading experience? So things like that of just
Which
like...
is what personal quiet time started out as, is a
Right.
community reading. Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't even possible until a few hundred years ago
Yeah.
when people
Yeah.
started getting their own Bibles. So those sorts of things, just like, hey, have you ever considered that, like, it's sort of like the fish that doesn't know what water is, like these are just the things that we're used to, but maybe they're making Bible reading harder than it needs to be. And then the third section is all about the Bible's story. And like, okay, we've gone through the formatting, kind of the physical interaction that you're having with the Bible. We've gone through some of the practices, but then like at a 30,000 foot level, what is the Bible actually for? Mm-hmm. Like, if you don't have kind of a mental model, mental framework for what this book is for and how it all ties together, you're going to do what a lot of people do, and what I did growing up which was like, it's kind of a grab bag of like, find the principles that seem to apply most closely to you, get your favorite stories, get your favorite proverbs, your favorite psalms, and just kind of like assemble them into a theology or a worldview. And my argument in the last part of the book is that the story is kind of the red string that ties it all together, that there is a big story from Genesis to Revelation that we need to continually familiarize ourselves with, and that Jesus is kind of the interpretive key for all of that story. So not only is it kind of a linear narrative, but it's also a narrative that's kind of curving towards Jesus at all times, right, no matter where you're reading. So like, trying to get people equipped at three different levels to read and experience the Bible well.
Yeah, going back to that first level, again, the kind of paratextual issue, it reminds me of this debate we have as college professors about the type of citation formats people should use. I don't know if you remember this from college, but this kind of like, should we use footnotes or APA, parenthetical in-text citations? And my argument has always been, footnotes are by far the best because they're the least intrusive, right? Yeah. It's just if you want more, you just, the little number, it doesn't interrupt the reader. Maybe I can ask a very simple question. Why is it called The Bible Reset, this book that you wrote? This isn't a book review, by the way.
Yeah. No, it's, reset was kind of the best word I could come up with to encapsulate what I was trying to do. Like, when I hear reset, a lot of times I think, my phone's acting up or my computer's acting up or whatever. And like, what do you do at that point? You'd turn it off and you'd clear out all the clutter, electronic clutter, right, or whatever is in there.
All the ones and zeros go back.
Exactly. Like, just kind of reorganize things back to how it was put together and start it back up. And I think that's a lot of what I'm trying to do in the book, is like, a lot of stuff has gotten built up over time around the Bible and in the Bible. And what I'm definitely not saying in the book is like, oh, something is inherently flawed with the Bible itself.
Right.
It's all this other stuff that's kind of gummed up the gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And again, which can be helpful in some contexts, and I'm not advocating for like a find and replace sort of methodology. It's
Right.
very additive. But like, let's get back to some of the more natural, kind of foundational ways that the Bible was given to us and engage with it on those terms. And where it's helpful, we can bring in some of the more modern ways as well. So, for example, with Bible study, I'm not saying, all right, get rid of your study Bibles. Like, they're of no use to you. Only use Bibles that are formatted for reading. I would say my suggestion is use a Bible formatted for reading, read big, absorb kind of the vast swath of Scripture, and then dig in with your study Bible and dive deep and understand more of the context and that sort of thing. So kind of complement it with some of this older way of doing things.
Yeah, I've always said gulp, don't sip.
Yeah.
When you don't yet understand. Now, once you have a firm grasp on it, you can start dropping in and sipping a little bit and thinking about particular things and letting them roll over. What are some other? I'm trying to remember from your book some other ways. I actually think the example you gave of the phone resetting it is not necessarily correct.
Okay. Yeah.
You tell me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
But because when you turn on a phone, it basically goes back to the way it always does things. And it seems like you're actually suggesting something a little bit more perverse than that, if I could.
Yeah.
That actually seems to be almost like there needs to be a breakup in some ways of the former way of doing things, assessing what was good and then thinking about what might be better. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I would say so. Like
Okay.
not just going back to the way it was for the sake of the way it was, but like really just taking a hard look at what's working here, what's not, what's beneficial, what is a hindrance, that sort of thing. And saying, how can we kind of reorganize all of this stuff that we have, that we are, lucky enough to have,
Yeah.
into the best sort of ecosystem for engagement that we can possibly put together.
Yeah, like a SWOT analysis
Yeah.
on our Bible reading plans. So I think you suggested not just reading big, but reading big chunks over and over again. Right.
Yeah.
And I guess the interesting thing you said, because I've had that conversation with Paul too, where he talked about we're selling millions and millions. I don't remember the numbers, but I remember him saying something to the effect of, the Bible division of this major publisher, one of the top 4 publishers, was like the biggest selling division of all the other ones combined or something. It was some ridiculous amount of Bibles. So, I mean, we talk about they sell so many Bibles, and I never had translated that over into the revenue stream of selling Bibles. Like, you're just like, oh, isn't it great? People are buying Bibles.
Yep.
Then you
Yep.
realize, oh no, there's people marketing them Bibles and they're
Yeah.
buying them, and it's making a ton of money for those people so they can do other things. And at the same time, people are owning more and more Bibles, but their understanding of the Bible is dropping out, right? So you have these two curves that are going inversely. Hey there, if you've benefited from this content at all, please hit the like and subscribe, or subscribe and like, one of those, or both of them together on this video. It helps us tremendously with the math algorithm nerd monsters.
And again, like that's what I try to convey in my book is like, listen, in some ways you kind of been set up to fail here. You haven't gotten a great hand to deal with as just like a normal person with a job and kids and a house, and like you've got a lot of life you're dealing with. And now you have to kind of have this uphill climb for reading and engaging with the Bible. So what are some of these barriers and obstacles that we can take away and make things easier?
Yeah, and you've talked about immerse as one of those. Are there any other versions of the Bible that you find particularly helpful for this kind of engagement?
Yeah,
Besides
good
audio
question.
Bible would be another one.
Which one?
Audio Bibles.
Oh, yeah. Yep. There's actually, speaking of audio Bibles, there's one called Streetlights. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of a fun, especially for like the younger generations. It's an audio version, and they have like a hip hop sort of beat that they put behind.
Yeah.
And it's got like a little bit of music and rhythm to it. And I think that can kind of, especially for things that might feel a little bit more dry, like just give a little more life to the listening experience. There's a whole bunch of different readers editions out there now, which Immerse would fall under that category. A lot of people are doing just really interesting renderings of those sorts of things. Some people doing like single volume editions that are a little bit more practical, where Immerse is 6 volumes and it's meant for just kind of taking one piece of the Bible with you. So there's a lot of good things being done, I think. I can't say enough good things about like the Bible Project and those guys who are trying to make kind of literary context and the Bible's themes and plot lines and storylines and that sort of thing accessible for regular people that have 8 or 9 minutes to sit down on YouTube and digest things. There's a lot of good stuff out there.
And to the Bible Project too, when I was talking to Tim and John once, when I asked them what their greatest fear, like 25 years from now, when they look back with regret on what they did, what would be the thing they would regret? I was actually expecting that they would say something like, "Oh, I wish we could have done more," or something like that. And they both said, "Yeah, we're kind of terrified that people watched our videos but never actually read Scripture." And there's really no way to measure that right now. And so that the hard work of just getting in, like you said, like moving to another country and just living in that world and letting that kind of literature and language saturate your thinking, it is hard. And so I don't want to sell it as like this super joyous activity as if it's always going to be fun for everybody. But I think also people who do it, the one reaction that I can commend and certainly comes across in your book is that people develop a sense of awe and reverence of this literature as well. They realize at first it feels like, oh, they're just telling a story. He went there, then he went there, then you're like, wait, what? How did that, and you start seeing connections come alive, and it goes from kind of a 2-dimensional, long, ancient story with poetry and law into kind of like a 3-dimensional with all kinds of callbacks and hooks and hyperlinks and interesting things going on.
Yeah,
but you won't ever see those unless you do these kinds of things that you've suggested. In the book.
Yeah, and I will say you made a good point there. The point of my book is not to say like this will remove all friction and it'll just be like really easy and you're just going to have a blast doing it. Like Leviticus is still Leviticus, and we just have to kind of.
I love Leviticus.
I'm saying that to the wrong person.
I get it. Yeah, Leviticus has a very difficult first 6 chapters.
Yes. And our friend Paul would say you still need to be slightly heroic in like committing yourself to doing this, but there are ways to make it easier than what we've made it.
I like that, slightly heroic.
Yeah, I've always kind of latched onto that. And then the last chapter of my book, the last so what portion of it is like, okay, the Bible's a story, but it's also a drama. Like you have a role to play in this. It's not just observing the story from the outside. And I think that might be where it can really be brought home for people of just like, oh, this is why I'm doing all this. Like it's to familiarize myself with the narrative, with the person of Christ, so that I can find my place in kind of the trajectory of this story. And I think if we can get people excited about that sort of idea, it'll be a little bit more sticky, I guess, than what it has been.
Yeah, I think there are other benefits that you allude to, and I think are foundational for what it means to be the church too. One of which is if the pastor is the only one who knows the biblical text, then they can kind of do what they want, right? I mean, we're depending on him or her being good people and not manipulating it, right? But all of us have lived long enough to know that there are people whose sinful condition overtakes them in manipulating the text, right? Mm-hmm. So I think having a biblically literate, if not fluent, congregation actually, they can hold their pastor accountable. They can hold each other accountable according to what the text says. They can discipline each other appropriately rather than getting offended about the wrong things. So, all kinds of good offshoots from this renegotiation of our relationship with the Bible. Well, Alex Goodwin, thank you very much for your time, your wisdom in the book. We don't usually do book interviews, but I really like this book, and I would recommend it without reservation, The Bible Reset. This is from Nav Press, so I'm sure you can get it anywhere that you can buy a book.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.